There's something nobody talks about regarding Virgo, not because it's a secret, but because it's invisible, because it happens so internally, so silently, that even Virgo herself can't see it happening. And that's what this video is about. Not about the traits you already know, not about the organization, the analysis, the perfectionism. You already know all that. You've read about it, you've heard about it, you've recognized it. What nobody told you is what happens after Virgo finishes preparing, what happens when the oldest argument she holds within herself finally begins to crack. Something changed today. Perhaps you woke up with that feeling, not a certainty, a slight disturbance, like when you realize the silence in a room is different from before. The day seems the same, the routine is in place, but something no longer fits, and you can't name what it is. This is not by chance. This is Virgo's internal seismograph detecting a tremor before anyone around feels the ground shake. Virgo notices first. Always. The problem is that she rarely trusts what she perceives when the object of the tremor is herself, because Virgo learned very early on to be an expert in everything except herself. She analyzes the world with near superhuman precision. You can see the loose thread in a narrative, the inconsistency in a script, the detail that everyone else has overlooked. But when it comes to seeing her own patterns, Virgo develops a strategic blindness, not out of carelessness, out of necessity. Because some patterns, if seen clearly, demand change. And change for Virgo isn't simply rearranging the schedule. It's dismantling part of the identity she spent years building, brick by brick, like a meticulous architect who designed her own house without windows to keep the wind out. You know this house. You probably live in it. Each room has a function. Each function has a rule. Each rule has a reason. And the reason, if you're honest with yourself, has always been the same. Not to be caught unprepared. Not to make mistakes in front of anyone. Not to start something before being absolutely sure it will work and that the result will live up to the internal standard you've built throughout your life. This isn't weakness. This is intelligence working in survival mode. The problem is when survival mode becomes the only mode available and Virgo starts to confuse security with immobility. Think of a pianist, not a beginner, a serious pianist who has trained for years, who knows every scale, every technique, every nuance of the score. He practices in the morning, practices in the afternoon, corrects finger position, adjusts the pedal, works on tempo with a dedication that few understand. And yet he doesn't go on stage, not because he doesn't know how to play, because you know too much about what can go wrong. Because the audience will hear what no practice can erase, that no performance is perfect. And for Virgo, imperfection seen by others is not simply a mistake, it's an exposure. It's showing that beneath all that preparation, there is something still incomplete, still human, still vulnerable. You think you know Virgo. Maybe you even think you know yourself, the organization, the high standards, the keen eye for detail. It's all there. It's real. It's yours. But there's a layer beneath that layer, one that Virgo rarely shows, not because they hide it on purpose, but because they themselves haven't yet been able to see properly what's there. This video is about that, not about the traits, about the mechanism, about what happens inside Virgo in the moments when preparation ends and real life demands it begin. Because there is a phenomenon, rare, silent, completely ignored, that happens when Virgo reaches that threshold, when the oldest argument she has begins to crack from within, when "I'm not ready yet" loses the voice it always had. And what happens at that moment changes everything. Not because the sky changes, because something within Virgo finally stops waiting for permission from herself, to exist in a more complete, more real, more personal way. If you've ever felt like you're about to start something without knowing exactly what, without a name, without a form yet, this video is about exactly that. Stay until the end. And this is where the phenomenon begins. Not with a thunderclap, with a loose thread. That unsettling feeling that the story you tell yourself no longer adds up the way it used to. That the explanation that worked a year ago has become a little too narrow. You still use the same words, the same internal arguments, but they no longer convince with the same force. The strength from before. Something inside you already knows that the preparation is over. And that's exactly what's most frightening. It was while searching for answers to this that I found this digital book. The divine path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose is not a self-help manual. It's more like a high-resolution mirror, one that shows not only what you project outward, but what you avoid seeing inward. For Virgo specifically, it touches on that point that no horoscope can reach. The space between knowing and doing, between understanding and beginning, between building the perfect pattern and trusting that it's already good enough for the first real step. You are now in a very specific state, still processing what has been said here, recognizing perhaps with a slight discomfort that the story of endless preparation isn't just yours. It's one of the most sophisticated ways Virgo has found to protect itself. And this recognition, when it's active like this, so intense, is the moment when it has the most power to change. Not tomorrow, when routine absorbs everything back. Now, the link is in the first pinned comment. But be aware, this content may be taken down. Click now and download your copy. Tell me in the comments, what's the phrase you repeat to yourself most often when you're about to start something important? The one that sounds responsible, but deep down, you know it's just a shield. There's a word that Virgo uses very frequently and examines very rarely. It's a word that sounds responsible, cautious, even mature. A word that, when pronounced, rarely raises questions because it seems too obvious to be questioned. That word is yet. I'm not ready yet. Something is still missing. I still need to think more, organize better, understand more deeply. Virgo's yet is one of the most elegant protective mechanisms that exists. Because it's not a negative, it's a postponement. And postponements don't seem like refusals. They seem like wisdom. They seem like responsibility. They seem like the only sensible thing to do. But what happens when you examine this yet with the same precision that Virgo applies to everything else? What do you find when you stop accepting the word as an answer and start treating it as a question? Still. Why? Still. What exactly is missing? Still. And how long has this yet lasted? Because for many Virgos, the yet has existed for so long that it no longer has a concrete answer. It's a habit, a posture, a way of being that has settled so deeply that it seems like personality, when in reality it's protection disguised as patience, when in reality it's fear using the voice of responsibility. And here's the most troubling part. Virgo's yet isn't a result of irresponsibility, it's a result of intelligence. Virgo knows better than any other sign what could go wrong. They've seen the details that others ignore. They've foreseen the problem that others haven't anticipated. They do, in fact, have an extraordinary ability to map risk. The problem is that this ability, when turned inward, towards their own dreams and projects, doesn't protect them. It paralyzes them. Because Virgo applies the same level of critical analysis to their own possibilities as they would to an external project, but without the emotional distance necessary to be fair to themselves. For themselves, they are always the most severe evaluator. The standard they demand of themselves is a standard they would rarely demand of anyone else they loved. Think of that pianist again. After years of practice, he finally sits before an imaginary audience just to test himself. He plays well. But the moment the last chord resonates, what he hears inside isn't applause. It's a list of everything that could have been better, the lightness that was missing in the second movement, the hesitation in the most difficult passage, the pedal that was a second too long, and he thinks, I'm not ready yet. I need to work on these points more before going on stage for real. But the real stage never comes, because there will always be a new point to work on. There will always be a new reason for the yet. And the musician inside him, the one who has something real to say, something that can only be said in public, grows old inside a rehearsal room that never opens to the world. There is a silent cruelty in this. Not the cruelty that comes from the outside, the cruelty that Virgo practices against herself with surgical precision and without realizing it. Each yet is a gentle, unspoken no. Each, when everything is ready, is a door closed with the key turned from the inside. And Virgo guards this key as if it were a sacred object, when in fact it is the only object that stands between her and the life she spent so much time planning and so little time living. But there is something even more revealing about the identity that Virgo has constructed. It is that it wasn't built all at once. It was built up over the course of accumulated responses to situations that demanded precision, that she be right, that she not make mistakes. Every time Virgo was the one who noticed the problem that others ignored, she learned that noticing was her value. Every time she organized what was in chaos, she learned that organizing was who she was. Every time her analysis saved a situation, she internalized, without analysis, no me. And what happens with an identity constructed in this way is that it needs to be constantly proven, not because Virgo is insecure, but because the identity is anchored in performance, not in being, in doing, not in existing. And when they stop, when there is no urgent problem to solve, Virgo is left with an uncomfortable and rarely verbalized question. And without all this, who am I? The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey toward the clarity and genius you deserve. There comes a point when Virgo's inner argument begins to crack. Not suddenly, gradually, like a wall that seems absolutely solid until the day the moisture accumulated over years reveals the fissures that have always been there. You don't see the crack forming. You only notice it when it's already big enough to no longer ignore. And the clearest sign that this moment has arrived isn't a dramatic revelation. It's a silent exhaustion. The feeling that the old system has become too heavy. That maintaining the narrative of endless preparation is more tiring than simply starting. This is the phenomenon that no one names because it doesn't have the form of a sign. It doesn't appear in horoscopes. It doesn't come with a set date. It's the moment when Virgo, in the silence of a completely ordinary instant, washing dishes, looking out the window, in the middle of a conversation that has nothing to do with it, realizes that the effort of not starting has become greater than the effort of starting. And that's disturbing, deeply disturbing, because it contradicts everything she's built as justification. If maintaining the yet has become more tiring than letting go of the yet, then the yet was never about protection. It was about control. And control, when examined closely, is always about fear. But what exactly is it about? Virgo fears what comes after perfection, because after perfection, after the moment she finally delivers, finally begins, finally appears, there's nowhere left to hide. The result is there, visible, exposed, accessible, and the most feared judgment isn't that of others. Deep down, Virgo knows she can handle external criticism. What she's unsure she can bear is her own judgment. The risk of finishing something, of looking at what she's done, and concluding that even after so much preparation, it still wasn't enough. That the internal standard, the one built with such rigor over so much time, wasn't reached. And that, therefore, the fear was never irrational. It was all her life the only honest thing she had. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey toward the clarity and genius you deserve. And here's where the phenomenon changes its nature, because there's a point, rare, unannounced, silent, like everything that matters, when Virgo stops rationalizing exhaustion and begins to listen to it. When the body says what the mind has refused for years, that remaining still is costing more than any risk of starting. It is at this moment that the still loses the voice it always had. Not because Virgo decided to be courageous overnight, but because she finally became too tired to continue being cautious about her own life. And then she confuses this with weakness, with surrender, with that thing she always feared becoming. Someone who gave up on the standard, who relinquished the requirement, who settled for less. But here's the inversion this video truly wants to deliver. The collapse of the yet is not weakness. It's the logical conclusion of the process that Virgo has always led, with the discipline and intelligence that only she possesses. It's the dam that was built to hold back the water, and which, when too full, doesn't collapse through carelessness. It collapses because it did exactly the job it was built for, to the very last possible limit. The collapse is not the end of the construction. It's proof that it worked until the end. What Virgo interprets as surrender is, more often than not, maturity. It's the honest recognition that the next level of growth no longer fits within the walls she erected to protect herself. It's not that she's become weak. It's that she's become too big for the bunker, and bunkers, however well built, weren't made to be inhabited forever. They were made to protect while the threat existed. And the threat that Virgo has always feared most, that of not being enough, has never been as small as it is now, at this very moment when she can finally name it. Here's what Virgo rarely hears said clearly. The exhaustion of control isn't a sign of failure. It's a sign that she's succeeded beyond what the old system could handle. No structure, however solid, is designed to function indefinitely without renewal. Virgo knows this better than anyone when it comes to anything outside of herself. She would reject a project, utilize a system, recognize when an old approach no longer serves a new problem. What she's still learning is to apply that same intelligence inward, to recognize that she herself doesn't need correction, she needs expansion. And expansion requires that the old walls give way to what has grown within them. And then comes the moment that no one prepares you for, the first step that has no name, no guarantee, no instruction manual or sequence of procedures that Virgo can follow to be sure it will work. For Virgo, who has built their entire life around certainty, procedures, sequences, having everything in place before acting, this moment is the strangest of all, because it's the only one where all the preparation they've done doesn't serve as a map. At most, it serves as an impulse. The impulse of someone who has trained so much, who has internalized so much, that the knowledge is no longer in their head. It's in their body, and the body already knows what to do, even when the mind is still asking for more time. A sailor who has stayed in port for a long time knows everything about the sea. He knows nautical charts, has read about currents, has studied wind patterns with an attention that any captain would admire. But none of this knowledge, none of these hours of study and preparation replaces the moment he drops anchor. Not because the destination became clear, not because the sea became calmer, but because remaining in port became impossible, not from the outside, from within. The impossibility did not come from an order, from an external event, from a favorable circumstance that finally arose. It came from within. The sea did not change. The sailor changed. And that is exactly how the first step works for Virgo. Not with total clarity, but with the growing and inevitable impossibility of remaining where he was. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey toward the clarity and genius you deserve. Who is Virgo when you stop preparing? Who is she when the yet finally falls silent and the movement begins? That's the question this entire video has tried to answer. And it doesn't have an answer that can be given here, because that answer only exists on the other side of the first step. Not before, never before. And that for Virgo is simultaneously the most frightening and the most honest thing there is. That true self-knowledge doesn't come from analysis. It comes from action. Not perfect, not guaranteed. From the real, the kind that has the weight of the world and the mark of being human. But what can be said is this: Virgo, on the other side of yet, is not a different person. It's not an improved, braver, more evolved version of herself. It's the same person, only finally visible to herself, with all the details she always saw in others now gently turned inward, with all the analytical capacity she used for years to map risks now being used to recognize her own value, her own competence, her own wholeness that has always been there, waiting with the patience that only Virgo possesses for the right moment to be seen. The rare phenomenon this video announces isn't in the sky. It never has been. It's not a special planetary configuration that happens once a generation. It's not an awaited external moment. The phenomenon is you, Virgo, reaching a point where preparation meets courage. Not the courage of those who feel no fear, the courage of those who feel everything, the anxiety, the doubt, the weight of their own patterns, and begin anyway. Not because the fear has gone away, because it has become too small to justify further waiting. What begins today is not a project. It's not a goal written in an organized notebook. It's not a new phase decreed by the heavens that you will cautiously observe from the outside, waiting to see how it unfolds. What begins today is you, the version of Virgo that stopped asking permission from herself to exist in a more complete, more real, more honest way with everything she has already built within herself. And this, among everything this video has presented, is the only phenomenon that has always been worth waiting for.